Your Best Manager, episode 22.
But she would always say, well, let's take a look at this, or how about this? And she really helped me expand my thinking. And I also think she gave me the best piece of advice that I've ever been given by any manager in my career.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Your Best Manager podcast, featuring interviews with senior managers and leadership experts, as well as practical advice for first-time managers. And after today's show, be sure to hop over to yourbestmanager.com and sign up for my free live masterclass, where you will learn 7 strategies to retain top talent and help your best employees reach their potential. It is time to engage, everybody. This is Jamie Newman here, and I'm excited to be joined by Jill Christensen today. Jill, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Jamie?
I'm doing great, actually. That's a lie. We just talked like 2 minutes ago. I'm a little bit under the weather. It's just that my standard response is say I'm doing well, but I'm doing well considering a little bit under the weather. Jill Christensen is an employee engagement expert, best-selling author, and keynote speaker who has helped thousands of leaders and HR professionals improve business results by re-engaging employees. Jill has served as the head of global internal communications at both Avaya and Western Union. She has a Six Sigma Green Belt and authored the best-selling book, If Not You, Who? Cracking the Code of Employee Disengagement. Jill is consistently rated among the top speakers at events she attends and works with the best and brightest leaders around the world to improve productivity, customer satisfaction, and revenue growth. Jill lives in Denver and is passionate about global travel, skiing, live music, extraordinary food and wine, volunteering, the NFL, balance, and Maine Coon Cats. And before I ask you to talk us through your career, Jill, why Maine Coon Cats? I'm not a cat guy, but that seems pretty specific.
Most people aren't cat people, and Maine Coon Cats are not like normal cats.
Really?
So they're equivalent to a golden retriever. And so they're very large cats who were bred in Maine in the United States.
Yeah.
And they have very long fur. And they have the personality of, again, a golden retriever. So they follow you around the house. They wait at the door. They're not the type of cats just to go off on their own and be by themselves. They're very social. They're very friendly. And so the nickname for the Maine Coon is called the Gentle Giant because, again, they grow to about 20 to 25 pounds. They're very large cats.
Wow. And
they're just incredibly friendly and kind and nice and sweet. And they're wonderful pets to have.
Really?
They happen to be now the most popular breed of cat in the world.
I did not know that. That's incredible.
Yes, because they're not like a typical cat.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I still don't think it's going to convince me to be a cat guy. But next time I see one, maybe I'll be more friendly. I shouldn't say I'm not unfriendly to them. Maybe I'll approach it. Maybe I'll approach it and be a little bit more open-minded.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, why don't you kick this thing off, Jill, by giving us a brief overview of your career path and just how you got to where you are today.
Will do, Jamie. So my degree is in communications, and so I was recruited right out of college into AT&T Public Relations. And I spent the first 22 years of my career in the telecommunications industry working in the New York City area. And then about 7 years ago, I realized I no longer wanted to work in that area. And more importantly, I no longer wanted to be an employee. I really thought that I had, with 2 decades of business experience under my belt in Fortune 500 companies, I thought that I had the experience to be able to launch my own consulting firm. So I moved to Denver and I began doing employee engagement and internal communications work for companies here in Denver and around the United States who were looking for a consultant to come in and either create something that didn't exist in their company or to supplement what they already had. And what I was finding, Jamie, is that companies would bring me in, originally they'd say, well, we need you here for about 3 to 4 months. And I would end up staying for like 2 years. And so 2 years ago, I realized that I would have to change my business model so that I wouldn't be going into companies as a consultant and staying there for years and years and years. And so I decided that I was going to write a book and start keynote speaking and change my business model to where I don't go into companies and stay there for years. What I do now is I teach companies how to fish. And so if there are companies who come to me and say, Jill, we saw you speak or we read your book, and we really need your help fixing our culture, I say, fantastic. I have a one-day strategic work session that we can do where I will immerse you in employee engagement and we'll make decisions in that day about what you're going to do differently to engage your workforce. And then you are going to own the employee engagement strategy that we create, and you are going to execute on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I've got to ask, though, why employee engagement? And the reason I ask that is when you think about problems within the world of employee engagement, that means many toxic environments, that means disengaged, that means complaining. Is that not an exhausting profession?
It is very exhausting, but here's how I landed on this. So for the first 22 years of my career, the majority of what I did was internal communications. I did a little bit of employee engagement. And as I said earlier, I worked in the telecommunications industry that entire time. So because I hadn't worked in any other industry, I thought it was only the telecommunications industry that was somewhat dysfunctional.
Oh, really?
And then when I launched my consulting career and started working in pharmaceuticals, in the mining industry, in the financial services industry, in the software industry, company after company after company have issues with their culture. And that's when I realized that this employee engagement thing is not just a problem in telecommunications. It is industry agnostic, and there are poor cultures in every single industry, and that this problem is rampant. And so, after realizing that by working in 7 different industries, that's how I decided that I was going to shift from primarily doing internal communications to focusing on employee engagement full time.
So, and what's the latest stat? I'm assuming because I keep hearing 70% of U.S. workers are disengaged right now. Yes.
So Gallup just conducted their latest round of surveys, and now it's 71% are disengaged in the United States, 87% globally.
Wow.
Yes.
So the good news is you're in a world where you're able to provide value because there's a big problem. The bad news is there's a big problem.
Absolutely. The bad news is there's a big problem. The good news is there are people out there like myself who are choosing to immerse themselves in this space and become experts so that we have the skills and the abilities to help companies re-engage disengaged workers.
Yeah, that's awesome, and we'll certainly, as this conversation goes on, I'm sure dive into some of those things. But let's keep the ball rolling, and we're gonna go right into this golden question for the interview today. When you look back on your career, who was your best manager? And maybe it wasn't a manager, but a mentor. So who had the most significant influence on your career, Jill, and why?
So it's interesting to me because at the time I didn't realize this, but now that I look back on my career, my best manager was the manager who was least like me as a person.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a person who, and in the nicest way possible, questioned my decisions. As I would say something to her, she would say, well, let me give you another something for you to think about. Mm-hmm. So, that you potentially, she wasn't trying to shift my opinions, and she wasn't really playing devil's advocate, but she always gave me another lens in which to look at something. And so she was fine if I stuck to my original decision, but she would always say, well, let's take a look at this, or how about this? And she really helped me expand my thinking. And I also think she gave me the best piece of advice that I've ever been given by any manager in my career.
Which is,
I remember there was a time when the CEO at Avaya made a decision that I completely did not agree with that would affect virtually every employee in the company. And so she told me what that decision was, and then I was going to be responsible for executing on that decision.
Right.
And I remember, not just saying to her, I really don't agree with this, but I'll do it anyway. I remember basically fighting her and going to the mat and saying, I completely disagree with the CEO. Here's why. Here are the negative things that I think are going to happen because of it. I feel very strongly about this. I can't believe this decision is being made. And she could see how passionate I was about it. So she did actually go back to the CEO and speak with him to see if he would change his mind. And he said no. And I remember when she came back to me and gave me this information, and I didn't let up. I kept going with why I thought it was a bad decision. And she looked at me and she said, Jill, she said, as a leader, there's something that you have to realize. She said, you are not always going to agree with the decisions that are made by the leaders who are above you, but as a leader, you must align. She goes, there's just a point where you've spoken your mind, you've shared what you think, and when a leadership team decides, no, we're not going in that direction, this is the direction we're going to go in, that it makes absolutely no sense for the extended leadership team of that company to continue digging in their heels and to fight. And it makes all the sense in the world for you to get behind the senior leader and to work to ensure that that decision lands the best on the employee base.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's not an easy realization to come to. It's not an easy pill to swallow.
No, it isn't.
And I'd imagine that you run into this on a regular basis, where you talk to employees, go figure, that are disengaged, and they've got a problem with something that the leadership has done, and their thought is, well, I need to stand up for what I believe in, or I need to quit. So
exactly.
What do you tell those people?
I think it depends on how bad the culture is, because, Jamie, to be honest with you, I do say to employees who come to me and say that their culture is really horrific and they don't think they can work there anymore. And what I say to them is, have you spoken to leadership about what you think is wrong and what you think they could do to improve it? Because it doesn't help in any company when employees just stand up and complain. The best employees are those employees who point out a fault or something that's wrong or a broken process within the company, and then say, and here are a few recommendations as to how we can improve. So what I say to employees is, the truth of the matter is, from my experience, if you have a senior leadership team who does not put people first and who truly do not care about the culture, then there's nothing you can do. You can tell them in the employee engagement survey how unhappy you are, and you can give them ideas about what to do differently. You can also buy them leadership books and say, here's a great book with a strategy in it that I think we could be implementing here. But at the end of the day, if your senior leaders do not embrace employee engagement, and if they do not care that the culture in the company is crappy, and you have spoken up and you have given them a potential solution, then sometimes there is no other option but to leave and to find a culture that is a much better fit for your personality and for your style, because everybody wants to work in a place where they are valued and appreciated and recognized.
Yeah.
And I think it's how we honor ourselves. And so there are a lot of cultures. There are cultures that I've worked in. There are cultures that I've consulted for where, I'm just being completely honest, based on the leaders who are currently there, I don't believe their culture is going to change. And so I wouldn't recommend that anybody stay.
Yeah, that's good. And I like how you started that off by saying, hey, the first question is, have you communicated how you feel?
Absolutely.
Because business is not a true democracy, and good leaders aren't going to go to their entire company and say, all right, we're going to vote on every decision. So you're not always going to agree with the decision, but you want to be part of a culture where your opinion is heard, or where your voice is heard, and that's I think
Absolutely.
pretty powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. In fact, in my book, it's one of so I have a 4-step process in my book that talks about how to re-engage employees. And the third step in that strategy is to create an open and honest two-way communication culture. And that's all, but the two-way communication is critical. It's not just about senior leaders pushing out information to employees. It's about senior leaders saying to employees, this is what's going on in our business. We want your thoughts. Or we're in the process of developing our 2017 strategy. Here's the skeleton, or here's the draft version of that. What are you thinking? You're closest to the customers. You're in the trenches. You've got great ideas.
Yeah.
And when senior leaders create an environment like that, it's incredibly invigorating to employees. It engages employees. But more importantly, you're getting the thoughts and ideas and solutions of your employees. And we all know that the best companies are created not by a senior leadership team sitting in a conference room making decisions on their own, but by putting everyone's heads together, because we're all so diverse as individuals, and we all come from different places. We have a different lens on the world. We have different experiences. We've been educated differently. We've been raised differently. That's another huge thing I've learned in my career. I think many times as a leader, you think that it's your responsibility to come up with the answer. And as I led more and more teams, I realized that my team really wants to provide value and they want to give me input. And so at my staff meetings, I would say, we're about to create, our goals for next year as a team, and I don't want to do that on my own. Let's have an open and honest conversation about what you think they should be,
Yep.
how we can add the most value to the company. And again, good leaders do that, but many leaders do not.
Yeah. Hence the stat we were talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. Hence the disengagement.
Yeah. Now, something else I just wanted to highlight before we keep moving. I love that you listed an example of your best manager as someone who you didn't realize at the time and someone who pushed you. Because I felt that myself, and it's something that I find really common is oftentimes it's not until you look back that you realize the impact someone had. And my own, the best managers I've had, I've gotten in arguments with. I mean, there's not a good manager who I haven't fought with. And I think that's because good leaders push people and good leaders challenge people. And I love that you brought that up.
Thank you. And another thing that I give her a lot of credit for, she didn't go around and hire people who were exactly like her. And that's another key to great leaders. Great leaders know their strengths and they know their weaknesses, and they hire people to fill in their weaknesses because it rounds out their team. However, what most managers do is they hire themselves.
Yeah.
Because we tend to gravitate toward and like people who are most like us. However, if you have a team of people who are exactly like you, you're always going to come up with the same answer.
Yep.
And you're not going to think out of the box, and you're not going to challenge one another. So again, like you said, Jamie, at the time, I remember there were nights where I went home and I'd be like, why is this woman causing me so much grief?
Yeah.
And why is she playing devil's advocate? And why is she pushing me? But in retrospect, she was extraordinary for me because she really enabled me to think differently and be open to different ideas and different opinions. And she challenged me. When I speak to my teams and they describe me as a leader, they say that I'm tough but fair. And I like that label because I think that the way we learn and the way we grow is to hear people's, different opinions and to be asked some difficult questions. And so that means you're going to have, a manager, if the person's doing that, who is not wired the way you are.
Right. Yeah. Great perspective. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
And now I'm going to take a guess here and go out on a limb and say that you weren't always an expert in this space. So I'm wondering if maybe you could tell us a challenge that you've experienced when you were a first-time manager or a new leader, something that maybe a mistake you made or maybe even a commonality you found when you were just getting started that was a real challenge for you.
Okay. I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was not realizing that when you're a manager, when you're a leader of people, you're going to spend approximately 30% of your time acting in a psychologist role.
Interesting.
So you are going to, and whenever I say this to other managers, they're like, wow, Jill, I never realized that, but you're completely right. But that's why so many people say that it's difficult to manage others. Yeah. And the reason why is because people don't just come to work as a worker. They come to work as a mother, a father, a person in this world. And they not only bring their work stuff to work, they bring all of their personal stuff to work. And so if they're having a difficult time in a relationship, if their child, let's say has autism and isn't doing well in school, if they're in a fight with their best friend, if they're having financial difficulties, they can't help but bring that to work with them because they're a whole person. And so nobody managed my expectations that I would have people coming into my office on a regular basis, closing my door and sitting in my office and sharing with me what was going on in their personal life.
Yep. The most tears that I have seen have been managing people.
Correct.
Correct. But it's really rewarding at the same time when you can watch those people grow. And when you can see the impact that you have on the people that you lead, I don't mean to paint a negative picture. It is an incredible opportunity that leaders have.
No, it is absolutely incredible. And, it's interesting because if you are a good leader, like a work leader, then I think a lot of people assume that you're just, you're well-rounded, that your emotional intelligence is high. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to think of you as someone who they can go to with their personal problems or to, a safe space, if you will. There are times when those employees came into my office and they weren't looking for me to solve their problem, if you will. They just needed a shoulder to cry on. They just needed to let it all out. And they didn't feel safe doing that with either their friend or a spouse. And so, they saw me as that person who could be their rock. Mm-hmm. And it's such an incredible, sometimes it felt like a burden, but when you take a step back, it's really such an incredible honor to know that you can be that person for someone. So you're not only acting as their mentor and their guide and their inspiration and their motivation and their leader, but you're also acting as someone who they can really open up to. And I think that's a mark of a really good leader, when you can be both of those things to your employees, mm-hmm. because they are, from my experience, Jamie, they are going to be looking for that in you.
So what do you tell someone who hasn't experienced this before, someone who's just starting out in a leadership role, aside from, hey, get ready, this is part of the job description? I don't know if there's anything someone can really do to be prepared other than recognize that, hey, it's going to happen and listen first.
Yeah,
but
I think it's very important to know that, there are a lot of smart people in this world, and that's your intellectual intelligence. But we've seen tons and tons of studies recently that say your EI, or your emotional intelligence, mm-hmm. is more important in order for you to succeed in the workplace. And if you are leading people, this is absolutely necessary. And so I think if there are books that you can find to help you understand people, mm-hmm. And I'm just going to be really honest and tell you, for me, what has really helped me understand people is just to live on this earth for decades and decades and decades. and to see that, people are wired differently, that, there are a lot of people who have issues in their childhood that they've never dealt with, mm-hmm. that they're going to be bringing into the workplace. And I just think that many times, even though, people might be really smart, just from an emotional standpoint, they're not as advanced. So if you can be advanced from an emotional standpoint, then you will be helping the people on your team who come to you.
Yeah. Well, there's 1,000 things I want to talk about right now because I love this topic, but we're going to have to keep rolling. And what I'm going to say is, for everyone that's really enjoying this conversation, you've got to subscribe to this podcast, and you've got to find Jill and follow her and pick up her book, because I think a lot of what we're talking about, I mean, we're only scratching the surface here. Mm-hmm. There's just so many cool and exciting challenges that leaders face, and the world of employee engagement is not just mm-hmm. Hey, fill out a survey, figure out what our percentage of engagement is, and boost it a point. There's just so much more than that. But we're going to keep rolling. I'd like you to tell us something exciting that's happening in your world right now.
So I think the most exciting thing that's happening in my world is the fact that I'm starting to speak nationally all over the United States, and my goal in 2017 is to speak internationally.
That's exciting.
And so it's really exciting. So my go-to-market model, I don't do marketing. I don't do cold calling. I don't send out direct mail pieces. What I do is I'm a thought leader, so I have a huge social media presence. And so I'm constantly putting information out there mm-hmm. about employee engagement, about how to be an extraordinary leader. And I also speak. So I go around. I started speaking in Denver, and now I'm speaking all over the United States at major conferences. And I share my message about how to re-engage your employees. And then the way I get my clients is those are people in the audience who have seen me speak.
Right.
And so then they come to me and say, Jill, we completely resonate with what you talked about. We need help fixing our culture. We'd like to engage with you. And the other really exciting thing is I'm publishing the second edition of my book on January 1st. And, I was a first-time author this year, and people told me that once you author a book, you'll author many more books, and I didn't believe it, but I'm finding that it really is true.
They're like tattoos. You can't have just one.
Exactly. I wouldn't know about that, but I do know about books.
I don't have a tattoo myself. That's what I hear.
I've heard that's the truth about tattoos as well. And potato chips.
And potato, yeah, you can't have. That's awesome.
Exactly. But it's so exciting because as I immerse myself in employee engagement, and as I do this year after year after year, I just keep learning and growing in this space, and I want to share that knowledge with my followers and with the people who need help in this area. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to publish a book and an Audible, so that people can while they're driving, while they're in the gym, learn how to be a leader, learn how to engage their teams.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've got one last question before I let you go, and that's related to books. So, what's one book you'd recommend first managers pick up? This can be your own, but I'm actually no, it can't. So what's one book that first time managers should pick up, including your book or alongside your book? That's not the right words I'm using.
Thank you, Jamie. So I would think the book is Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And I remember reading that book when I was in my young 20s, and it's still something that's completely applicable today. And, it's incredibly direct. It tells you if you're going to focus on any areas, here are the 7 that, we think you should focus on to be an extraordinary leader. And again, I think the book is timeless. So again, I read that book almost 3 decades ago, and I still pick it up today. He is an extraordinary speaker and a leader, and I highly recommend that any first-time manager read that book.
Awesome, and good book recommendation. And we have run out of time, though. Jill, thank you so much for your time. If someone listening wants to connect with you or find your book, where's the best place for them to go?
Okay, so if you'd like my book, it's on Amazon.com. And again, the name is If Not You Who, Cracking the Code of Employee Disengagement. So it's available in paperback and on Audible. So you can listen to the audio version again while you're driving or at the gym or anywhere. And then my business is called Jill Christensen International. And so my web address is JillChristensenIntl. And you can access my website at that URL. And then if anyone would like to reach out to me or have a conversation with me, I would love to do that for your listeners. And my contact information is on my site.
Awesome. Well, I will put the link to your website as well as link to your books and anywhere else that you are online so that people can find you. And they'll put those all in the show notes, which are available at yourbestmanager.com. And it's really easy because you can just search Jill from the homepage and find everything from today's episode. And managers, I'm not sure if you're traveling to or from work, getting a workout in, or simply taking some time to relax and listen today, but I hope that you've been encouraged and inspired from our conversation with Jill Christensen. Jill, thanks again for sharing some of your story with the next generation of leaders. I truly appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, everyone, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Now hop over to yourbestmanager.com and take advantage of the free tools, resources, and training which I've created exclusively for you, the next generation of leaders. Oh, and have fun.